favorite song and love to sing. Every time we hear the music and we're in this love again, we got to find that last
This is open doors to ideas, discovery, knowledge, and experiences to help people realize their dreams. We are committed to providing quality library services, being an information gateway and community hub where our residents, young and old, can be introduced to the world beyond. We are committed to doing so through innovative programming, fostering community partnerships, leveraging resources and services for our residents. Through our 5 library locations, we have dedicated staff to help you with your information needs, to recommend the latest books, and to help you to read, help you navigate a vast array of online resources, job, career preparation, adult education, family literacy, and much more. We are honored to have Mayor Andre Sang, Councilwoman Dr. Elisa Mims, Councilman Louis Velez, Reverend Douglas Maven, and Mr. Howard Fulcher as our guest speakers here with us today. We send warm congratulations to our honorees. Thank you, Jimmy, and your team for planning such a wonderful exhibit event, and also choosing Paterson Free Public Library as your venue to display the history of this rich city. Today, prepare yourselves to be educated, excited, and inspired. I want to say once more, on behalf of the Library Board of Directors, the staff, and myself, welcome, and it's a pleasure to see you, many of you here, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you.
I won't talk about history, but I'm going to bring someone here that in his own right is a historian and a photographer and was born and a pharmacist. And what I love about Mr. Howard Fulcher is the fact that his story is uniquely his. There are a number of uniquely Fourth Ward, I'll say it like that. And there are a number of books that have been written about the Fourth Ward, specifically the Paterson riots and Dr. King, but none of them will, I guarantee you, none of them will have the perspective that Mr. Fulcher will enlighten us on today. So I'd like to present to some and introduce to others, Mr. Howard Fulcher.
Yeah.
I want to say first that I'm not a hero. If I had been in slavery, I wouldn't have made it. It could be because I'm 12% European. I'm going to have a short quiz as an icebreaker. I'm going to give you a name, and just shout out a name that goes along with this name, but don't use the name I give you. Dana Owens. A president named Jack. You said Jack. John Kennedy. Satchmo. El Haj Malik.
Malcolm X.
Where is New Scotland? New Scotland. Very important in the black life. Nova Scotia. Before the blacks went to Africa, they went first by English ship to Nova Scotia, then they went to Sierra Leone, and then to Liberia. That was the route. Kwame Ture. Stokely Carmichael. Lou Alcindor. Leroy Jones. You pass. My story is, as Jimmy said, a unique one, but it's not unusual. My name is Howard Sterling Fulcher. That's important, the middle part especially. My father and mother were born in their respective homes in Paterson and Passaic. In fact, my father was born in 92 Governor Street. My older and younger brothers, Joseph Jr. and Richard, were born in St. Joseph's and Barnard hospitals here in Paterson. I was born in Harlem Hospital in New York due to my family's relocation to that city. I didn't know it at the time, but that was our first brush with discrimination. My father had grown up working at Williams Pharmacy here on Broadway at Martin Luther King Boulevard. But when he completed his training at Rutgers in the first 4-year class, they had no place for him to work as a pharmacist, except on Jewish holidays. So he went to New York and found employment and moved the family to New York, where I was born. Soon after that, he found a position in Jersey City with an African-American pharmacist, and the family moved back to Paterson, including me. And we moved to 93 Strait Street, where we lived for about 16, 17 years. During that time, he had been working part-time in Montclair for Womble's Pharmacy and Hackensack for Tabor's Pharmacy, but his main pharmacy was in Jersey City. He worked there for 7 years before we opened our own store here on Rosa Parks now, which was Graham Avenue in 1952. I started there at 10 years of age as a stock boy slash salesman slash delivery person. As you may know, my dad, Joseph C. Fulcher, was the first registered pharmacist in Passaic County. My registration came 30 years later in 1968. I therefore was introduced at a black pharmacy group where I was president in Newark as the first second generation black pharmacist in the state of New Jersey. At first I heard it, I said, what the heck is that? And it took a while to grasp all of it. My career included working with Dad in family pharmacy for many years, plus employment at many of the local medical facilities. Barnard Hospital, Paterson General, which some of you may not even know about, St. Joseph's, and also North Jersey Developmental Center. Not only did we fill prescriptions in the drugstore and supply OTC medications, we also mentored the next generation to do their best in whatever fields they chose. Some pharmacists that were trained in our pharmacy were Ronald Dotson, Thomas Fields, John Francis, who was from Hackensack, who became an Army physician later in life, and V.J. Patel, who I brought in from Wayne General, which was Paterson General. And they all got licenses through working with us. Both of our grandfathers, that's my brothers and I, were born in North Carolina, while one grandmother, Dad's, was born in Louisa, Virginia, and Mom's was born in Hempstead, Queens. Many people may not know that Hempstead was part of Queens until 1899, when it became part of Suffolk County, or Nassau County rather, than Long Island. Our relatives in Hempstead were free blacks since 1821, but the relatives in the South came through extended slavery conditions. According to Wikipedia, New York State passed a law in 1799 for gradual manumission, that means release from slavery. After that date, children born to slave mothers were free, but were required to work for their mother's master for an extended period as indentured servants until their late 20s. Existing slaves kept their status. All remaining slaves were freed on July 4th, 1827. This is New York. In contrast, New Jersey passed a similar law in 1804, but still had slaves until 1865. They were supposed to be released, but they were not. What does the year 1865 mean to you? Well, to me, it conjures up many thoughts. The Civil War had recently ended. President Mr. Lincoln was assassinated. The Freedmen's Bureau was started to create colleges for blacks, and the KKK originated. The poor whites still had nothing. We had brand new schools. The Emancipation Proclamation also was another thing that happened in that era. Most of the predominantly black colleges were started in this period. Howard University, where I went, started in 1867. After completing school number 6, well, let me go to this first. My first exposure to the South came in 1953. My dad's brother, Uncle Henry, and his wife, Aunt Leela, invited me to drive with them to West Virginia to visit with cousins that I had not known about. There I met several cousins and 2 generations and my dad's Uncle Julian driving his mule. I came back with a picture of the mule with Uncle Julian behind him. My father said, "Why didn't you take a picture of Uncle Julian?" I said, I've seen uncles before, I've never seen a mule. I didn't say that to him. Uncle Julian was my grandma Lucy Fulcher's brother. She passed away in 1950 when we were very young on Straight Street. While in Oak Hill, West Virginia, to get Pepto for my motion sickness, I sat at the soda counter. My uncle asked me what I was doing after he finished, and I said to him, "I'm ordering a milkshake." He said, "No, you're not. Come with me." He took me outside and told me where I was and what that meant. I was 11 years old and ignorant of the ways of the world, or should I say the ways of the country. Here I got my first taste of real, while I was there in West Virginia, I got my first taste of real Southern meals with all the fixings. I also got my first brain freeze from drinking not well water, but cistern water. Does anybody know the difference between a well and a cistern?
I think the cistern is where you crank it and the water comes out.
No. Well water is natural water that's in the ground and has a natural level. Cistern has a protective lining around it and you put water in it to store it. You can collect rainwater or you can buy water and put it in it, but it's a storage container in the ground. That's a cistern. My cousin corrected me many years later. Okay, after completing school number 6 at Eastside High, I left Paterson with Casper Martin, another Eastside graduate from Gowan Avenue, and headed for Howard University in Washington, D.C. to study pharmacy. We got there in the evening and drove around looking for our dormitory. We saw names like Douglas Hall, Truth Hall, Tubman Quadrangle. We said, "What is this?" This was way before Black Studies started. Our hearts were pounding in awe of our surroundings. Our dorm had not yet been named, just called New Men's Residence Hall until the following year, when it was christened for Dr. Charles Drew, the researcher of blood plasma storage and transfusions. I don't know if you know about Dr. Drew, but he was the one during World War II that allowed blood to be stored for long periods of time, but he broke up his relationship with the Red Cross because they were giving donated blood from black people to black people, donated blood from white people to white people. So he took himself away from their racism and no longer worked with it. Besides the rigorous studies in pharmacy school, I found time for intramural softball, the first African-American rowing team, and demonstrations with another freshman, Stokely Carmichael. In my first few years at Howard, I would meet and become acquainted with many young folks who would go on to make names for themselves, mostly in a good way. 2 of these were Claude Brown. Anybody recognize that name? Man-Child in the Promised Land.
Yeah, I heard that.
And another fellow from Nigeria, Africa, Samuel Adebonojo. He finished pharmacy school with a 100 average, moved over to pre-med, finished in 3 years in the summer school, became a thoracic surgeon. In fact, he did open heart surgery on one of our former mayors, but we'll go into that later. In the middle of my college experience, I took a detour and joined the Army for 3 years, much to my dad's dismay. I thought it practical for my growing purposes, but he didn't think so. I was able to stay in the pharmacy field and travel to Texas, Alabama, California, and then to Ludwigsburg, Germany, where I completed my active duty. I was in Alabama for virtually all of 1963. This was the time of the bombing of the 4 little girls in Birmingham, the assassination of President Kennedy, and several other things that were going on throughout the state that seemed at that time like isolated incidents. When you look back to 1963, it was a tumultuous year. This is While traveling on Highway 231, a major artery still today, I saw a burning cross with white hooded men near Troy, Alabama. This is just a capsule of things that I've experienced in my lifetime. My family on my mother's side came from a place 3 miles below Raleigh, North Carolina, called not Bloomfield, but Broomfield Plantation. It was owned by a Hinton person from Europe, but all my Hinton relatives came from there. As we were going through life as slaves, we didn't really have last names, so when emancipation came, a lot took the names of the owners. There is a slave narrative that you can look up, which is my great-grandfather's brother, Robert Hinton, has done a slave narrative. A lot of those were done in the 30s in the United States, but they have been done all over the world, I just found out. And my great-grandfather Gaston's name is in a church that was built by black people, AME Church, St. Paul's, in Raleigh, North Carolina. His name is still on the plaque as a trustee during the late 19th century, 1892 or something like that. I was 5 years old when my mom left me on a corner and went home. That was the first day of school. When the bell rang, I was ushered into school 6. The second day I was, that was supposed to be a joke. The second day, ladies got serious, but the second day I was resigned to my fate. A few of us were weeded out for special class, those deemed not able to keep up with the rest. The term autism was not yet widely used. It was actually invented in like 1911. But in the 1940s, it still wasn't being used widely. I had a scissors incident when I was in kindergarten. The teacher passed out scissors for all of us to practice cutting out little symbols, and I gave the barber sign over my head, showing my friends. Of course, I had to sit with my hands crossed the rest of the class. The finger painting was not original because the teachers always held your hand while you painted. My dad started Old School 6, which is a block away across from Reverend Maven's church. And then when the New School 6 was opened in 1921 or so, he went to the New School 6 while Eastside was being built. So by the time he finished School 6, he was able to go to Eastside. I think he was in the 3rd class at Eastside. My mom went to School 10 before she went to Eastside. So all 5 of us in our immediate family finished Eastside High. My first real memory started at 93 Spray Street. Even though I was born in New York, I don't remember anything about it. My dad moved us from Stray Street to Madison Avenue because they had started a black pharmaceutical association, which met basically in Essex County where most of the pharmacists were. And he was slated to have a meeting, so rather than have everybody come to Stray Street, we moved to Madison Avenue. So I came home from school in 59, and for Thanksgiving we were on Stray Street, but on Christmas we're on Madison Avenue. Not that they try to get away from you. My dad was president of the Passaic County Pharmaceutical Association for 2 terms, and roughly 10 years later I was president for 2 years also. And the same thing is true of the Black Pharmacy Group down in Essex County. He was president 2 terms and I was also. When I was going to school at that time, one teacher taught all subjects until you get to like the 5th or 6th grade. That's when we traveled, quote unquote, to different courses. At the time, I think we had maybe 3 black teachers in the whole school. Cooking teacher, music teacher, and maybe one other, substitute teachers we had, yes. Manual training and math and art we traveled to after the 5th grade. The best part about School 6 was gym class, when we had the big gym. When the girls had the big gym, that's when we went over for square dancing. That was lots of fun. We were able to throw the girls around. Another thing I want to say about this building, the lady that donated the land for this building took her house and moved it to West Paterson. Nobody mentioned that before. Yeah. We did have her carriage house on the side. That was the museum for many years before it moved down in Market Street. Some of us older folks will remember that. I came here first to get my library card in 1950. And without my mom, I signed up with a pencil, got my 3 books and went home. The lady said, "Are you sure you'll be able to finish?" I said, "Oh yes, I'll finish." And I brought them back the next Monday. My first authors from school were Thames Williamson, Thomas B. Costain, Herman Hesse, John Updike. Later on, I went to Carter Woodson, James Baldwin, Claude Brown, Toni Morrison, and even Barack Obama. My mission today is to get you to read, not just to listen to folks, but read yourself. There are a lot of biographies and autobiographies out there about the slave period and periods before and after that are very, very informative. I read a book called Black Over White, another one called The Underground Railroad just recently. I finished it this week while I was writing this. And it's very interesting. 12 Years a Slave. If you saw the movie, you only saw like 20% of the story. The rest of it is in the book. Beautiful story. Not that it's good to have that happen, but very well presented. At Howard University with me during my first and second periods were Stokely Carmichael, Claude Brown, Jesse Norman, the opera singer, Kenneth Spaulding, son of Asa Spaulding from North Carolina Mutual, Richard Wesley, who wrote Uptown Saturday Night and Let's Do It Again, Larry Mizell, Fonz Mizell, and Freddie Perrin. Anybody know those names? All 3 of them finished. Dwight Morrow went to Howard, then they went to Motown. They wrote I Want You Back and many songs that the different groups sang over the years. Charles Tolliver was with me there. He's now a teacher at the New School in New York, and he has a big band that he travels worldwide with. Felicia Allen Rashad was in school behind me. And right after her came her sister, Debbie Allen. Conrad Harper finished a year ahead of my original class, and he became the first black man to lead the lawyers in New York City. William Paterson was governor when the city was named after him. Then he became a Supreme Court judge. He thought that African Americans would never be able to live without white assistance. That was one of his great quotes. As I've mentioned before, I had gone on 2 demonstrations with Stokely Carmichael while a freshman. One of them was to Woolworths because they weren't hiring blacks. The black women were pushing us out the way to get in the shop. We were trying our best to help them, but they was like, "Boy, you better get out of my way." My service time, I was at Fort Dix at first, and then Fort Sam Houston, Texas for advanced training. At Fort Rucker is when I ran into a white, what I call a redneck sergeant. When our president was killed, he was laughing. If I hadn't had restraint from my parents, I probably would be in jail now and dead, because it really, really, really upset me. In Germany, I was part of a rock and roll or rhythm and blues singing group called the POWs, which was very instrumental in my sanity while I was away from home. But I really enjoyed my time in the service. I enjoyed my time in school, and we had a reunion recently. The people that finished 50 years ago. This is me on the corner. The school was 150 years old 2 years ago. This was our class went back for our 50th reunion. They gave each of us medals, and I brought mine to show you. So, I'd like to open the floor for questions if there are any. Otherwise, I'll just take my seat. you, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fulcher. I hope that you gleaned some knowledge about Paterson and the Fulcher family in this city. And I hope that you have also gleaned some knowledge about African American history in the city of Paterson and the National Park Service. And I just want to thank you all for coming out. Please, before you leave, if you can find a plate, I don't know what's left there, help yourself to whatever you like. I can't take it back home. I really can't. I can't. I mean, there's nowhere to put it, and I can't take it back home. So thank you so much for coming. I hope to see you next year. Thank you very much.
It's like a diamond ring, it's a precious thing, and we never want to lose it. It's like a favorite song that we love to sing. Every time we hear the music, and we're in this love together, we got the kind that lasts forever.